good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much indeed for joining us. We're coming to you live from a location very near the Robot Council, where a crisis is developing.
I'm not a robot. 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 Not a lonely robot. Did I say that? Did you say that? Did she say that? We did say that. I did say that. No? Then did I say that? Did you say that? Did she say that? We did say that. I did say that. No. Did I say that? Did you say that? Did she say that? We did say that. No.
Not you, not you, not you. Many. Several. Silver. Mirror, mirror. Not still. Near. But not still. Then far. Still not. Not still. Still not. Still not. Here. Present. Incorrect. Assembly instructions. Radio disturbance. Generic range. Traffic lights. Do connect joint 5 to start 1. Do connect lag 6 to rotary R9. If blue light does not come on, consult the manual. Reboot. Rethink. Rebake. Rewash. Redo. All prepare for the end. It's nearly the end. It's the end. The end. The end. The end.
I think it looks as if we're okay to start. I'm Nick Till. I'm one of the directors, co-director with Evelyn of the Centre for Research in Opera and Music Theatre. I haven't had a lot of association with this particular project, just because of the various distances that were all set up. So I had really no idea what to expect, and it was I really want to first of all congratulate the team, because it was quite a complex piece of work, and all the, as Elizabeth said, you know, all the videography and everything which you've put together in I know an incredibly short time, and it will, I'm sure, kick off lots of really interesting discussions. So let's get on with them. One just little bit of housekeeping. If people have got questions, this was what I was asked to say relative to yesterday, when Carol was actually in the studio and there were acoustic problems. I don't know if that's going to be the same today, but the suggestion was that the convention of putting questions in the chat. But that does then depend upon me monitoring the chat as well, unless someone else is able to pick that up. But I think probably I have to do that. But I think, okay, Kat says we're okay with audio questions, so scrap that. Good, that makes life easier. I would like to introduce our panel. Just before I do that, I'm just going to say one quick word for those of us people who may not know a lot about this project. This is the third iteration of this project. We started out with, or Evelyn started out with two little now robots, very roboty robots, and investigated what they could do, just two robots. And in the second iteration, we worked with a slightly larger Pepper robot, and with the idea of what happens when a human performer, who was again Loré, interacts with a robot. Does that change the dynamic and our understanding of the human non-human relationship and so on? And then obviously with Cleo we've got a life-sized robot, and for the first time also a humanoid robot, if that's the right word. I don't think it is, but obviously a robot that is trying as much as possible to replicate the appearance of a human. So actually, I want to start in my introduction to the panel by introducing Will Jackson, who is the creator of Cleo, and also the creator and designer and creator of Cleo, and also the CEO of Engineered Arts, who then made Cleo. And I wanted to ask Will, to kick off, if he could just tell us what Cleo has been actually made, what functions Cleo has been made to carry out, to do or fulfill.
Okay, thank you. Cleo is so Engineered Arts, we've been a little bit of background first. So we've been building humanoid robots for about 15 years now. Most of our applications are in kind of communication entertainment. So we provide robots to science museums, theme parks, all of that kind of thing. But we've also done stage shows with robots in the past. So what particularly is Cleo built for? What we're going for is kind of biological motion. So it's about replicating the kind of moves that people make with a machine, but very knowingly being a machine at the same time. So you can never get close enough or good enough that anybody's actually going to believe it's a person. That's almost an impossible ask. I actually prefer our robots when they don't have any skin at all. But for commercial reasons, a lot of people like them with skins on. So I noticed that you've left one hand unskinned, which I think is a nice touch in this performance to reveal the mechanics underneath. Sorry, I'm probably diverging off the topic here a bit, Nicholas.
No, that's great. Thank you. I mean, one of the things obviously we noted that Cleo doesn't walk, and a lot of effort goes into enabling robots to walk. What was the thinking there? Do you want
well, I'll maybe there's a very long answer, there's a very short answer, and there's the medium.
Short answer for now.
Okay, so walking robots are great fun, and we have done work on walking robots, but they are entirely impractical and not a commercial proposition. So there is one very well-known company, Boston Dynamics, who've been, Mark Raybert spun that company out of MIT 35 years ago. 1 year ago, they released their first commercial product. It's a quadruped robot. It has a niche application, but if you count the billions that have gone into achieving that, it's not a very good commercial idea. So that's one of the primary reasons we don't do it. That doesn't mean it's not great fun, and it doesn't mean it's not fantastic to look at. And in fact, the first time I saw a free walking robot, I think it was Asimo I saw in Tokyo, I actually wept when I saw it because it was so spookily uncanny. Your mind is saying there's a child in a robot suit, and then you're looking at it closer and knowing that can't be true. And there's this terrible disconnect with what your mind's telling you and what your eye is seeing. And it's quite an emotional experience. So I do love walking robots, but our walking robot project is Byron. But Mesmer robots like this are more of a commercial proposition, and in the commercial world, walking robots don't work.
Thank you. I think uncanny is a word that may come up again in our discussions. Now, your comment about Cleo with or without her skin leads me on to our second guest, who is Elizabeth Jochum. Elizabeth is head of the research laboratory for art and technology at Aalborg University in Denmark. She has a background in theatre, and I note that Google Scholar has one of her areas of specialism as puppetry, which is a topic that has come up a few times in our discussions about robot in theatre, so that may come up again. But more pertinently to what we've just been saying, one of her most recent papers, published papers, is entitled "Is a Soft Robot More Natural?" So I wanted to ask Elizabeth just to very briefly, just to say, is Cleo a soft robot?
Thanks very much, Nick. And yeah, just before I forget, I want to thank everybody for putting this panel together, and the production and research team for the fabulous performance. Is Cleo a soft robot? Well, Cleo might have soft parts. She certainly does. But there is a separate class of robots called soft robotics that I write about in that paper, and that is kind of a new area relatively new area in robotics research, and that is robots that are made with sort of deliberately soft parts and deformable bodies. And the goal of those robots is to provide kind of the flexibility and malleability of soft materials, and also soft design. So Will was speaking about how Cleo replicates biological motion in soft robots. We're still inspired by biology, but looking more to the sort of both the materials and the structures. So I would not say that Cleo classifies as a soft robot, but she is a robot with some soft parts. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Our next guest is Kath James, who is Artistic Director of Southeast Dance. Southeast Dance is an umbrella organisation that promotes dance in the Southeast region, supporting professional companies, developing community and education programmes, as they say in their mission statement, to make the Southeast a thriving home for dance. And Kath, what I wanted to ask you, if you could just say very briefly, what has brought you as a dance specialist to an event about singing robots?
Well, first of all, thank you again to the performers. Absolutely fantastic performance in such a short period of time to get that sort of level of commitment and detail. I thought that was fantastic. Well, I would say that over the last 20 to 25 years, choreographers have been really interested in that sort of liminal space between where dance and the dancing body finishes and where technology can interact with that. That sort of the physical nuance of the body, and how that can then engage with different sorts of technologies like AR and VR and exoskeletons, and you know, it started off with video and screen and then moved into sort of very lights, but now it's gone way beyond that. And there's a real appetite among choreographers to be pushing the boundaries of their work. And I think that the new technologies can enhance the relationship between what they're trying to achieve and those emotional states artists are creating on stage. And it's what technology can do to transform that. So I think that's been something we've been really interested in. We work with Brighton Digital Festival a lot to sort of present what artists are doing. We're currently working with robot swarms and exoskeletons, and so for us to be involved in this project's really interesting. It's cutting edge work, and that's where choreographers want to be.
Great, thank you very much. Our next guest is Annette Meese. Annette is the director of the Audience Labs program at the Royal Opera House in London, which experiments, I'm quoting from their own blurb here, experiments with immersive technology, opening up new experiences rooted in ballet and opera. Annette, what I'd like to ask you really is the same question as I asked Kath, which is what has brought you here today? Where might robots be fitting into your world?
Again, thank you for having me, and you know, bravo to the team for putting everything together. I think what just really intrigued me about this particular experiment was that experimentation of performance that really is a hybrid between the organic and the, you know, the artificial. And my background's as a theatre director, so I'm always looking at the emotion, like where in this experiment did my humanity get excited about it, and seeing people experiment with these mixed performances, these mixing of what robotics can do, what technology can do, what the human voice role is, how those two things interact, and really starting to push the boundaries of how we create meaning in the 21st century. So I think that for me is the interestingness about experiments like this, where we can see where it starts to fizzle artistically and emotionally, and where it doesn't quite work yet, and how we then move forward from there. Good art is what I'm interested in.
Great, and can you think where your human interest was aroused by the performance? Was there something that particularly?
I think for me there were two moments. So I think what's really interesting about Cleo is that she's sort of, you know, we have sort of that pareidolia thing as humans. We can see a human in literally anything, and then you know, in moons and burnt toast, like we're programmed to create human faces and humans out of anything. And simultaneously, there's sort of the valley of the uncanny, where we also very programmed to realize when something is almost human but not human, and therefore it's slightly off-putting. And I think what was interesting for me is that in this performance, it was a complete back and forth between those states. I remember being particularly intrigued when Loré was sort of approaching it, and there was a back and forth and almost a mimicking of this machine human. It sometimes Cleo almost felt like an animal or an alien trying to communicate and trying to learn how they communicate. So I thought that was a really interesting moment. And then the second one was very staging, which when people started playing with water, I think for me, all of a sudden, the fragility of the robot, like water on the robot, it's dead. It's completely annihilated, where humans are just a little bit wet. And that sort of distinction between the fragility and the possibility of the two different bodies, even when they're co-present in the same space, there was something really interesting in those two moments of exploratory exchange and fragility in different ways that I thought was really interesting.
Thank you. I mean, I agree entirely, but particularly that first one you mentioned. Yeah.
You sometimes felt godlike and sometimes felt like a tiny animal, and I thought that was really interesting.
Yes. Okay, so our final guest is Ron Chrisley. I can't now see Ron. Oh, there you are. Ron is director of the Centre for Cognitive Science here at Sussex, and he's also held a research position at Stanford in recent years. And he's also a reader in philosophy, with a particular interest in artificial intelligence. Ron is also a music lover, and he has been an intellectual companion, advisor, and sometimes even programmer since the start of this project, having been part of all three, or anyway, yes, involved with all three iterations. And Ron, I wanted to just to kick off to ask you, one of the areas that has interested you in the project has been the question of what does it mean for a robot to speak, and more particularly to sing, or for a robot to have a voice. And I'm just wondering whether your views on this have changed as we've moved through the iterations of the project at all.
Well, yes, I think the materials that Evelyn and her collaborators have given us, for those of us who are interested in this question about what is it for a robot to have, to sing or to have a voice, yet again, we have another success here. We have some wonderful raw materials to use, well, for me to use, I'll put it in the first person singular, for the wonderful materials for me to use when I'm thinking about this question, above and beyond experiencing it as an artwork. There's this food for conceptual analysis about what do we mean by saying that a robot has a voice. And I thought, in particular, the format, the Zoom format that we're almost all seeing through now. We're just kind of we've been doing it for so long now that we're trying very actively to ignore the fact that we're in Zoom. I think it really was a success here for me in that normally we would have spatial cues to help us identify a voice. So we can hear a sound as coming from a particular person, or in this case, a machine, and that would give us some cues. Oh, that is the voice of the robot. But here it's everything's disembodied. We hear a set of sounds, me through my headphones, that I'm wondering initially, are those sounds the coming from the machine? Could that be the voice? Because it seems to be a constraint on being a voice, that it somehow originate in a physical, from a body, from a physical location. And there's that extra ambiguity that I think worked very well in the piece, because eventually that was disambiguated. Gradually the sounds, for me at least, became more identifiable as something that we would say, well, there are words being spoken, so clearly that is a voice, and that's not one of the human performers. So that is Cleo's voice now. But there was a whole range of different possibilities in between. So it got me thinking about the role of spatiality in attributing a voice to someone, the role of sound similarity. How similar is it to voices I've encountered so far, like human voices, or how different is it? Is it carrying any content? Is it saying any words that I can understand? Is there a match between the movements of the robot and the sounds I'm hearing? That would suggest it's a voice, or say the lips. So all that was very interesting for me. And I think what we've seen here is an evolution. I mean, it's been a privilege to see this evolution that in the form of robot opera, as a form of as a, what do we call it, a genre. It's been really interesting to see the progress that Evelyn and her collaborators have made in developing new forms of this. I was impressed by, there's so much, I've got to cut myself short, but I was also impressed by the inventiveness of the staging, the interactivity with multiple human performers. So I was very pleased to have seen this.
Great, thank you very much. I want to put a question back to Will, just to move us on. I had a look at the demo video you made for presenting Cleo. And there were a few things I noticed. Firstly, it opens with Cleo doing some of her sort of repertoire of expressive gestures, accompanied by that sort of quintessential sort of heartfelt sound of a Bach solo cello suite. And also I thought I heard what sounded like breathing being added to the sound. And I remember that yesterday, one of the observations that was made about Cleo's reading the poetry was that she didn't breathe naturally in the way that a human has to breathe when she spoke. And then when she's asked to sort of demonstrate what she can do, she launches into the Dolly Parton song Working 9 to 5. So what I'm interested in is there something, I mean, what is it with music and Cleo? It seems to be a rather important kind of way she sort of exists.
Yeah, so humanoid robots, the kind of sole reason to make a humanoid robot, a robot, you know, anthropomorphic in form, is to communicate with people. And of course, song performance is fundamental to that kind of communication and entertainment, more in the sense of singing 9 to 5. I like the kind of performing by proxy, I guess. So I'm not the sort of person that would get up on a stage, but I'm quite happy to get a robot to do it for me. So again, I think I'm wandering off topic. So why does she sing, I think, was the basic question. I think because we enjoy it is the very simple answer. And for me, it's about building a machine that can be entertaining to watch. So it's about giving it those sort of qualities that can hold your attention, get you invested in it, make you believe in it. And one interesting thing is it's not really about look, it's really about movement. And it's that was an interesting comment about the localization of the sound as well, because we found a lot that if the sound doesn't come from the robot's mouth, you really don't associate it with the robot at all, even if it's making the right lip movements. So again, I think that was you know, thing about Zoom, that you don't get that. So it sings because it's fun, bottom line. And I wanted to see it.
I'm going to, if I may, I'll bring Evelyn in here and just ask her to say, I mean, one of the things in the earlier iterations of the project was to really work with the actual affordances that the robots had been given, which in the case of the now robots was, you know, very robotic little sort of childlike voices that are quite kind of sweet, but they're also very sort of automated as well. Yesterday we had a sort of in the poetry reading, we heard sort of 3 or 4 of Cleo's different sort of natural voices, really, I would say. What were you finding vocally that you could work with in Cleo that was interesting?
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so there are a lot of different approaches actually this time around. Previously, I had worked with what sort of comes with the robot. In the first iteration, Ron and I spent a long time programming. We thought that for a robot to sing, it has to sing with its own voice. So you can't just record a human and stick it in the robot. You've got to work with the affordances of the robot, as you said. So we spent a lot of time just playing with the text-to-speech interface. I did a lot of sort of typing and repetitious stuff, affecting the voice, making it go higher, making it go slower, and those kinds of things, and really playing with what it could do with its own speaking voice. This time around, I thought about it, particularly because we've got a robot that looks so human. I thought, well, what is voice for a human? A voice for us comes from our physicality. It comes from the realness of our bodies, its resonance and its materiality. Well, what is the materiality of the robot? Where does the robot come from? So I thought it'd be interesting, partly, to actually go and record the sounds made by robot manufacturers. So I went to the factory in Falmouth and recorded, spent 2 hours with the engineers there recording sounds, both from robots themselves as they move, the sounds that they make when they're moving, and also the sounds of the machinery. And so part of the robot voice that Cleo starts with is actually constructed by me using fragments of those particular sounds. And what I really wanted to explore this time was a kind of hybrid language between sort of machine and robot and human. So I also spent hours with our singer, the amazing Loré Lixenberg, recording her voice and chopping her voice up, and then putting it into a kind of mimic of text to speech. So I created my own kind of text to sound interface in the computer using Max MSP, and I mapped a bunch of her syllables onto the computer keyboard so that I could sort of type and create a kind of pointillistic speech song, if you like. And so then in the performance, I was trying to mix those sorts of sounds. So there was kind of a journey from machine sound towards human sounds, and then back into her own kind of, if you like, natural robot voice, so that she ends the piece speaking with her own robot voice, but she starts it speaking with this kind of machine world sound.
So she has to sort of learn how to speak in the same way. She has to relearn her gestures, or
yeah, but I think there's also a kind of a journey going on for the human performers as well, that they're also exploring kind of their materiality and their robotness, and their also mimicking the machine, and also mimicking the non-human as well. So the singer starts very singerly, but then she ends in the kind of making machine sounds and sort of bird song. So it's just exploring different ways, different kinds of vocality, I guess.
Can I invite any of our panel, if you wanted to sort of say anything about this sort of voice question of robotic voice question?
I had a question apropos that last comment from Evelyn, if I might, and it's for Evelyn and for Will, I guess. Yesterday in the discussion, there was some talk about 17th and 18th century automatons and the relation between Cleo and contemporary robotics and those. And there's a story that I read about one of those automatons by Vaucanson, who produced this flute playing robot. And around the same time, rubber was discovered, and the introduction of rubber into certain kind of industrial processes and for refining. And he, the inventor engineer, was interested in covering the hands of the automaton with rubber, because it so closely approximated human skin, and that he writes anyways that he was concerned that the materiality of the skin depressing the buttons on the flute, together with the bellows system that was powering the air, would somehow create a more natural sound. And Will, you mentioned earlier that you prefer your robots without the skin, and I just wondered, with this robot, have you noticed a difference actually in the quality of sound or voice and production when this synthetic skin is on the robot and off? Of course, it's a speaker system that comes from the mouth, the kind of how it's produced, and the speaker is located in the mouth. But does the materiality actually of the robot, with or without skin, change in any measurable way the sound quality? And if so, how?
Yeah, it's that's a good question. Actually, the speaker is, we can't actually get enough room in the mouth, so the speaker is just below, so the speaker's in the chest. You need to kind of recreate the kind of lung cavity of a human to get that kind of voice. So you need as much space as possible. From a purely practical point of view, we're always trying to fit as much mechanics and motors and things in there as we can. And so the sound has to work around that. The rubber of the skin itself does actually improve the quality of the sound a lot, because it provides a kind of damping, and it gives it kind of, it does give it that kind of human body feel, and you get a much more sort of tinny, sort of nastily resonant sound without the skin. And actually the clothes help a lot as well. So sound quality is something we really struggle with, because in a big space with a lot of people, sound is really damped down. And I don't know if you notice this, but in a big crowded space with a lot of people talking, it's hard to project your voice. And the robot has exactly the same problem. So I think, again, short answer, rubber is good, yes. And it makes for an improved quality of robot sound.
Thank you. One of the things I've just sort of noticed, there's a little thread here, because I started my question to you, Will, about Cleo's singing and music with noting the Bach cello suite, and actually with the very first iteration of the project with the Now robots, the instrumental music was provided by a cellist, our colleague Alice, and then the last two we've had Anton on his cello. And I realized one of the things that obviously that happens there, particularly most of all with the first version and the Cleo video, I think more perhaps than or less obviously with today's version, but there's that sort of projection of interiority onto the mechanical being that seems to happen with that. I think that what was, that's why someone chose to have a bit of soulful Bach cello suite. I think, while it gives Cleo's, rather gracious movements a kind of, choreographic sort of sentient about it, and I suppose I'm thinking, obviously in relation to dance, obviously not all dance is dance to music, but most is, and maybe in dance there's a similar sort of process happening, that when you put a mechanical being with music, it sort of gives it a kind of grace or a kind of presence or something. Do you think that's a fair thing to say, Kath?
Actually, seeing we've got the choreographer and dance artist of the project here on the Zoom call, I'm going to ask Janine Fletcher if she would. I'd love to hear your thoughts anyway, Janine, on the project and how you found it working with Cleo. But yes, if you want to give us your thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
Hello, everyone. Could you take me back to what you just said, please, Nicholas, so I can get.
That I think one of the things that happens when you put mechanical robots or whatever with music is that process, absolutely, standard response that we have, that tend to project the music as a form of interiority onto the object. And I think, the reason why particularly something like a cello is used, because a cello has a certain sort of kind of physical warmth to it that I think is particularly effective, which is why I think a Bach cello suite is, works in that way, and worked in the first version of this project. So I was interested to know whether, in terms of choreography in dance, that you think that same thing is happening.
I think it can happen. It didn't happen with any of this. So
yes,
the movement, the movement for Cleo did not come from a place of starting with music or musicality. And I, as a dance artist, am quite interested in creating something without music and then seeing what happens when music is put to it, so the audience start finding their relationship to what is happening. Being in it, it was quite hard for me to see from the outside what relationship might have been occurring between the music and the movement of Cleo. But I would imagine, there were definite moments of the sound, especially the cello, and her movement kind of combining as one moment. Movement-wise with Cleo, it's fascinating because you're not working directly with her to start with, you're working with software. So all of the movement is created virtually online on a virtual robot. And then that is uploaded to Cleo. And then you see that movement. So there's quite a few stages of how movement is created. And as a choreographer, I am quite used to instantaneous movement, of having an idea and working with a performer to create that movement. And in this instant, I had to work with the software, try and get to grip with that, and then we would upload it to Cleo, and the movement would be quite different. So there's quite a lot of fine-tuning just in making her move, and then to add on the layers of working with live performers in the space and music. Yeah, there was quite a lot going on to sense it. Yeah.
Indeed. Annette, I wanted to ask you. You sort of said some very pertinent things about what your interest in this whole sort of area of work is. But I also wanted to sort of just step back and look at it in relation to your role at the Opera House and what it is that you are trying to achieve at the Opera House, and what, you know, where the sort of virtual technology, virtual reality or immersive technologies or whatever, what it is you're able to do with these, specifically, and perhaps in relation to thinking in relation to opera.
Yeah, so with the audience labs, we are really looking at sort of the possibilities that digital offers to expand our stages and to expand the artistic possibilities and to expand stagecraft into these new places. So I often talk about technology as both new stages. So what does it mean to create an opera when you use technology or present it with technology? How do you create, again, good art for it? So what does good opera look like? Where does it do what we want opera to do, which is to, you know, to be beautiful, to be epic, to be transporting, to make us cry, to make us laugh, all of the things, the transcendence. And how do we explore artistry with these new tools? So I think that can go both ways. So we can bring opera to and explore what that would look like to new stages. So just looking at VR, mixed reality as a new stage. So an opera maker can create specifically for it to work there. And vice versa. Also, how do we bring technology onto our stages, and what does that mean? How do we keep that rooted in our stagecraft, in our humanity, in our emotion, while also taking advantage of sort of the possibility of storytelling that comes with these new magic devices? You know, I think this sits in a very long tradition of theatre changing when electricity came in. It allowed us to do different kind of things and to have to present work in different ways and to tell different stories in a different way. So I think as a live form, performance is so live and it changes every night, but also over time, to keep exploring and be curious about what's possible and meaningful, I think is what I'm really interested in.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the time, and I want to make sure, first of all, that if some of the other members of the creative team who are here want to say anything, they have a chance to, and then also to make sure that our visitors, our audience, are also able to ask questions. So I think what I'm going to do now is I'm going to have to switch screens to see, make sure I'm not missing anybody. But can I invite questions from the audience, I think just put up your hand, because there's not so many people that I can't see who's putting their hands up. So if anybody's got any questions, I'm going to jump back to the other screen just in case there's anybody there who's wanting to ask anything. Perhaps while people just gather their thoughts, Tim, you've also been involved with all three of these projects. Have you got any sort of thoughts about, you know, how your relationship to working with these beings has changed over the process?
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I worked on the first one, and I didn't work on the second.
Oh, did you? I'd forgotten that. Sorry.
I worked on this one, so I haven't really visited the topic or the experience for a little while, and it's a massive kind of step forward, or change really, into a different kind of level of development, I think, this time around. The starting point for this event was to really kind of work through a menu of kinds of encounters or interactions we might be interested in exploring. And then as that kind of, so we were going to have a kind of 10-minute study that was to do with movement and the robot, and a 10-minute study that was to do with singing and the robot, and so on. And then as we sort of got into it a little bit in the last couple of weeks, we just thought, well, maybe it's possible to have some kind of scenario that makes those kinds of encounters possible. And then having sort of taken that step, and because the event is billed as a robot opera, we wanted to think about, well, what does, you know, we wanted to sort of face the music, as it were, and face the form a little bit. So although a lot of work I've been involved in, the work that isn't opera, has been making the case often for opera being a very broad kind of bandwidth, that all sorts of different kind of activities can be designated as. In this case, we thought, well, maybe we should try and attempt some sort of narrative fiction drama. So that's why we came up with this scenario. And the scenario is that Cleo is the creation of robots, and she wants to leave the robot world and come to the human world. And then, having decided on that kind of threshold, then there are other ideas that introduced. Ideas between sort of death and life, and I suppose that took us into an echo of very early opera stories, like the Orpheus story. And then, okay, well, if this is a transition or a migration from one state to another, maybe we introduce different versions of Cleo into the same event. So Loré, the singer, and Janine, choreographer, dancer, were also Cleos. And therefore the kind of the possibility of sort of fruitful confusion between who is leading the action, who is mimicking, who is leading, who is following, or maybe they're all different representations of the same state of indecisive existence, if you like, the same sort of threshold they're sort of hovering over between being a robot and being a human. And then, so from that theme, various sort of formal decisions came, and then we just sort of arranged a series of episodes of things we thought might be interesting. So there were the very, very small toy robots, so robots on a completely different scale of, as it were, fictional consciousness. And also the room that we're in is a kind of machine with its own hum and noise. So that is that's a quite interesting function of this imaginary version of Cleo as a sentient thing that we're exploring. I'm quite interested in the toolbox of technology, historically as well as in our current times, and the way in which, as Annette's mentioned, opera and theatre has always been a technological adventure. But I'm also interested in what it means that we have these tools, and what the impact on the world is. So a lot of the work I'm interested in or have made is about the transformation of the world by technology, but doing that in kind of theatre form. And so I think that this project fits into that ongoing interest a little bit as well. And it was very interested because particularly Evelyn, I think, is trying to, as it were, rather than moving towards ever greater faithful simulation of humanity, there's an interest in kind of pausing at this moment and saying, well, what is the voice? What does the voice of an opera sound like? The voice of a robot, sorry, sound like? And I think that's a very kind of interesting imaginative space to be in.
Perhaps we should turn to Loré at this point, since you just mentioned her. If you're there, Loré, because the last project that you did with us was very operatic. There was it had, I mean, sort of musically and vocally very expansive. I remember very well your saying, kitty, kitty, kitty after the mechanical cat, but in a rather more extravagant way. And in this one, you don't get so many opportunities to sort of fill out the space with your, I mean, you do get some, but not quite as much. So I was just interested in how you felt the dynamic, was different in these two pieces with the different robots. How did you respond to them in the way that they were different?
Well, I think that the quality of the robots, as already mentioned, was very, very different. And the first time it was, I suppose, we had with a robot cat. I mean, it was ripe for comedy in a way. It was more comedic, and the structure, I suppose, was maybe a little more loose in some ways, and much more cartoon-like, perhaps. And yeah, I was using sentences, and also the robot was saying things to me like, "I want your job," and phrases like that, and this. But I think this was on a different level, and I think the scenario. I have to say that I thought that Tim's scenario was complete genius, because what I loved about it is that there was a narrative which was based on a journey of humans, between humans and robots. But I think what would be a real shame is if all this fantastic technology was just used to produce the same old shit that we've had for time immemorial. Like if it's just used, if we just have robots being humans again, well, what's the point in a way? It's like I was discussing with somebody in the break of this hologram Maria Callas. It's just it would be a sort of a bit like that, and it's a waste, because I think this could be a doorway to a totally new operatic form. And I think what was happening here was sort of just peeking into that world, so that it's really transforming the actual form of opera and how it's presented to people, and what is human emotion anyway. What are human emotions now? What triggers people now? It's very different. It changes all the time. So, and who are the people now anyway? I mean, and also I prefer this version of exploring the voice, because yeah, okay, you can go, oh, you can do all of that, but what's more interesting is breaking it down. What is it? Why is it like that? And also, what was quite interesting with Cleo, I thought it made me question what is the humanity in a voice, because and I sort of thought, well, if you look at someone's face as a singer, you're always thinking, well, what do they sound like when they sing? Like someone's face is like a set of speakers, actually. So the sound doesn't just come from your mouth, it comes from here, it comes from here. Everything resonates. And I sort of in my mind was kind of designing, I'm not a robot engineer, obviously I'm just a stupid singer, but I was designing a robot where the sound really comes from everywhere like a human being, with all the cavities in the bones, and like even your teeth have an impact on the sound of your voice, your whole physicality. So, and there's something about my voice coming out of, I wish I was I wish I had her figure, but it was sort of weird, my voice coming out of this very aquiline being, because so there's a whole raft of questions, but mainly for me the takeaway from this is the form, which I thought was really interesting and very delicate balance in the balance between a narrative and experimentation with form. So that's it. Bam. Is that right?
Great. Thank you very much. I don't know if Anton wants to add anything, because he also was played in the last piece as well. So Anton, if you're there, I don't know if you're...
Anton had to go, actually.
He had to go,
Nick.
did he? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. But can I just say one thing about the cello?
Yeah.
One reason for choosing cello, I think, is that just the sheer range of it, the sheer flexibility goes very, very high, goes very, very low. Another thing is that it does have this kind of human quality, but on the other hand, it has a kind of environmental quality as well. It's got the wood and all these kind of extraordinary sort of tapping and textural noises you can make. And then Anton himself is an extraordinary, like Loré, an extraordinary improviser and an extraordinarily imaginative musician in terms of just the sheer different types of sounds that can be made. So it's like having a whole world, having these two musicians, it's like having a whole environment around us. And I was trying to, I suppose, amplify that with recorded sounds. I spent time recording them and putting that, I don't know how well that would come across on Zoom, but in the space we had a bunch of speakers with recordings being played live and interacting live with the musicians, the live musicians. So that was another element I wanted to explore, this idea of opera as actually a distributed form where the cellist is also kind of a character, but he's also kind of part of the set, and he's also kind of just the part of the imagination and the ideas. So it's like opera, as Annette says, opera is very human, it's very emotion-based, but it's also, I think, for us, very ideas-based. And we're really trying to explore relationships, our relationship to the environment, our relationships to technology, and all of these things. So I've gone from cello to talking about these broader things, but I think that that's what these, incredible
that's the way
historical.
It goes.
Yes, the way it goes. Yeah.
Just to draw people's attention, actually, unfortunately, Jenny's just left. So, Jenny Rodderty has written a rather nice sort of response to the piece in the chat, if you haven't seen that, and Elizabeth has also added a response there. Just in the last kind of 10 minutes we've got, I just would like to open it to the floor. I mean, either can be a question or can be an observation about the performance, or anything else you want to say about working with robots. Anybody who'd like, or specific response to the performance. I'll just have to keep my eyes peeled for hands going up. Of course, any of our panel, please also chip in if you have got more you'd like to say.
Could I say something?
Please.
So one thing that I found really effective was, and something that I guess it speaks to what Loré was saying about we don't want to repeat the same old things, and it's always exciting when something new is able to be expressed, and I found that happening for me when with Loré and others responding to, in a way, learning from Cleo, and it just struck me, that's part of our predicament right now, is we have these adaptive technologies around us, and they're going to increase even more, and their ability to learn is often emphasized, but really we remain as humans much more adaptive and malleable, and change, more plastic, to use a controversial term. We're more plastic than the technologies we create are, as adaptive as they are touted as being. And so I find that for good and also for ill, we are adapting to our own technologies. And I found that part of the piece to be very poignant for me. But when Evelyn explained that some of Cleo's voice originated with samples from Loré, then it made it even, it kicked it up to another level for me, because then I realized that it's a kind of echo chamber, that obviously we are putting ourselves, and we find ourselves in these artifacts that we create, but then we adapt to them as well. So it's some kind of circle here, and whether it's a virtuous circle or not, I guess is yet to be seen. And but I found that to be very poignant for me, very captured something otherwise perhaps ineffable about our predicament. And I'm glad that Evelyn shared that extra bit of about the provenance of the sounds concerning Cleo's voice.
Yes, I mean the piece is kind of reflexive on this relationship, as meta-reflexive, as it were. Yeah. Anybody else want to say anything? I'm just jumping to the other screen. Well, if yes, Tim. Unmute.
Yes, there was one other bit of functionality which I don't think's come up in the conversation, which I just wanted to draw everyone's attention to, which is that one of the things that really intrigued us that Cleo can do is that she's got video cameras where her eyes are. So you can see, as it were, what she is seeing, what you imagine she might be seeing, were she able to see. And I thought that was sort of metaphorically very interesting for what we were doing, and the whole idea of her being able to see herself. So the idea of the mirrors came from that. We were intrigued at an image where a robot was apparently looking at themselves. So that was one of the images that was being fed back by the internet back into some of the projections that you were seeing. I just wanted to point that out as an extra function that we hadn't talked about yet. Mm-hmm. Intriguing idea, I think, because it's sort of recognition of yourself is a sort of classic idea in the kind, often, science fiction world, the kind of pathway to consciousness is you recognize a self, or you recognize an image of yourself in some way. So that was all. It was just mentioning that item on the menu. Yeah.
Okay. If I wanted to give people a chance, if anybody else wanted to say anything, but I think we've had a fairly wide-ranging discussion. So I think what I would like to thank all the people who've joined us from within the university and outside. Thank our panel who have come from various places as well to be with us, which is one of the advantages we have of the Zoom world we live in. And particularly to thank Evelyn and her team for their fantastic work, which I think has been enjoyable and aesthetically satisfying, as well as thought-provoking. So you can't ask for much more, really, with a piece of work.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Nick. Yeah, huge thanks to everybody.
This will be the project will be documented and put on the Cromped website. So if anybody wants to kind of look back, that's right, isn't it, Evelyn? But at some point we'll let everybody
Yeah,
know.
absolutely. Yeah, we've documented it, and it will need some editing, but it should be up in a couple of weeks, we hope.
Great. So if anybody wants to have a look at it again, I mean, there was a lot going on in the performance, so I certainly want to have have another look and see if I can pick out a few more of the strands of what were going on. And a reminder that this is the end of 2 days of work with Cleo, so we would like to thank Will particularly for the opportunity to work with Cleo on these two projects. Well, thank you everybody, and it's been a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Nick. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye.
Bye.